Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to do a February reading wrap up. I've got some amazing books to share with you. Also, what I think is possibly my new all-time favourite book I've ever read of all time. Who would have thought? What book has pushed Wuthering Heights off that #1 spot? Wait and find out. I'll tell you at the end. Also, two really exciting developments in my reading which I want to share with you. A Candy reading challenge catch up. This is the place for you to share everything that happened in the Candy reading challenge or any books that you're reading in the comment section. I can't wait to hear. So without further ado, let's begin. So the Candy reading challenge 2025, which I'm running here, the prompt for February was Fanguary. It was all to do with vampire fiction, which is a subgenre of horror or gothic that I've never read before. I am a real scaredy cat when it comes to anything like that, so I did approach it with trepidation. And when I went to pick up the first book in February, which was this one, Dracula by Bram Stoker, classic, which I've never read, I did pick it up at the start of February and think I don't want to do my own prompt, and it made me realise, well, I've never read any vampire fiction before when it comes to picking it up, because I'm so not a horror girly. At that point of picking it up and opening the book, I was thinking no, and I did in February, but I couldn't let you guys down. It was Fanguary. I do like gothic fiction, so I thought, come on, give it a go. And oh boy, am I pleased I did. I genuinely really loved this book so much. I've heard a few people now on BookTube say that Dracula is a comfort read for them, and I can totally see why this book would be a comfort read, and I think it's going to be a comfort read for me too. It is definitely a book that lends itself to rereading, which I did not think I would be saying in March. I don't think I've ever been as surprised by a book as I was by Dracula. I thought it was brilliantly written. Of course, it's all written via letters and different types of correspondence or newspaper articles, journal entries. So it's a very different format with the way it's written, but it's brilliantly done. So there's loads of different points of view in here, and I think that lends it such a beautiful depth, because you see those different points of view and you do fall in love with all the characters. And I think the female characters in here are really strong as well, considering this is a Victorian novel. The female characters are brilliantly written. They've got real depth, real courage. They are equally as important as the men, but I loved the way that the men kind of revered the female characters as well. There were some tragic love stories in here as well, melded through, and I loved that. So the characters, the form of the writing, I loved. Absolutely adored the gothic, lonely settings. I think the wagon and horse rides through the wilderness with the wolves howling to get to Dracula's castle is epic. I think that lives in all of us. Even if you haven't read the book, it didn't feel like I'd never visited that setting before. Really familiar in my psyche and in our collective consciousness. I think in the cultural collective consciousness, it's there, and that sort of lonely setting really mirroring the trauma and the fear and the dread, the gothic dread of the characters in the novel. Just brilliantly done, really good pace as well, and it just had me page turning so fast I just couldn't put it down. I loved every single minute of it. It was a 5-star read. I literally can't wait to reread it. I'm sure I'll pick up a load of extra things on the reread. I loved it and I was so surprised. So I then decided to try and be brave and to watch a TV adaptation on Netflix, a more modern version of Dracula, and I lasted about 3 minutes. Just couldn't do it visually on the TV, and it was a modern take on this, and I think that sort of modern take of visually depicting horror and the things that make you jump and the jump scares and the weird things in the corner and expecting something to pounce out on you, that gothic dread, I can read it but I still can't watch it. Literally I did 3 minutes and thought nope. Even reading it, I have to say, there were parts of this that made me have to take the dogs with me when I was locking up at night. So it did push me out of my comfort zone. Not enough to watch visual adaptations, but enough to turn this into a spooky favourite. So from reading Dracula and being so surprised, I then decided to stick to the trilogy that I said I might try around the key novel of Dracula. So this is the work of Dacre Stoker, I think that's how you pronounce it. So it's a family member, it's a distant relative of Bram Stoker, so it's in the family, and this book is said to be based on the notes of Bram Stoker, and this is a prequel. It's Dracul, and it actually features Bram and Bram's family as the key characters. So you move away from the characters in this book and you've got actually Bram Stoker's family, and it introduces Bram's experiences with the undead and with vampires. It also puts into the mix the fascinating possibility that Dracula might not have been a made-up story, which just got my spidey senses tingling. I love anything like that. In the author's note at the back of Dracul, it says that Bram Stoker first brought his manuscript to his publisher in the United Kingdom. He opened the conversation with one simple line: "This story is true." So it just opens up that possibility that Bram Stoker had these bizarre experiences that led him then into the story of Dracula, and that's what Dracul is. Now I loved this. It wasn't quite the writing of Dracula, or I think I get a little bit of sort of starstruck with the classics, so that always pushes my star rating up, how starstruck I am by like actually reading Dracula. So this was a 5-star, but this wasn't far behind, to be honest. This was a 4.5 star, so it was a really good read. It was scarier, I thought, than Dracula, and I think you can really feel in the writing, which I've not realised before, in more modern books. I think the influence of TV and films and TV adaptations plays into the writing, which wasn't present in here, but it was in a few scenes in here, like creatures high up in ceilings ready to drop on you. Not so much in there, but it just felt like a scene from a scary TV movie that would have me jumping to turn the remote off. There were a few scenes like that in here that put the visuals that frighten me in films more into the book, and I really could feel that influence of the modern world, modern films, modern TV in this. So I found this a bit more scary, but still a brilliant read. So then I was really keen, after these two under my belt, to read the official sequel, it says on the front, Dracula the Un-dead. So this is the sequel after Dracula, and you've got the characters that you find in Dracula are in this book, but set about 18 years in the future after Dracula ends. But you've also got Bram Stoker appearing in this, so it's a mishmash. Now, I'm not sure whether I would recommend this. If you love if you really love Dracula and it's a comfort read, I would say don't read this. Not because it's not a good read. I still gave it a 3.75 star rating. So it was a good read and I did enjoy it. But it took a lot of liberties with what happens with the characters next after the end of Dracula. And I hated what came next. It's not what I would have wanted for any of the characters. It left me really sad. I think the through line of the three novels got a bit muddled as well in this book. I was thinking, well, how would that have happened in the progression of the book? So it's a little bit muddled. You've got a female vampire in here, which I really loved. You have the whole character of Dracula being played with in here as well, which I don't know as I can see that in here. So it left me with questions and it kind of took away a little bit from my read of Dracula. If I could go back, I don't think I would have read this, but it was still a good read if you're just reading a vampire book. But yeah, not sure. These two though, these two play on each other beautifully. This one, not so sure. So that was my reading for Fanguary. Those were the 3 books I got to. I've got loads more vampire books in my doll library waiting for me, but I only managed to get to those 3 in February because I had lots of other things to read. Namely, in February, the announcement of the non-fiction women's prize long list, which really caught my attention this year. So it's the first year, Irene, I paid any attention to any of the prizes, the women's prize or the book prize. And because I could never really buy brand new books, never really paid attention. But in February, I started using my library more and I worked out how to put books on hold, which was incredible. And I managed to put, which you've already seen in another video, a few of the long list for the Women's Prize for Non-Fiction on hold. And I read one of those in February. So I read Wild Thing, Life of Paul Gauguin, so one of my favourite artists. I talked about this already, so I'm not going to talk about it for too long in this video. But it was part of my February reads and I absolutely adored it. I really hope this gets onto the shortlist. Really excited to know what gets onto the shortlist actually. I just find it fascinating, brilliantly written. It really helps that Gauguin has been one of my lifetime all-time favourite artists. Loved it. That was a 5-star read as well for me, my second 5-star read of the month, which I loved. So that was another read in February. So using the library has really opened up my reading life. I think if I look back in the future, I will say this February was the month that I suddenly got it. I suddenly realised that the library was there and it was full of wonders. So that's been a big change. Also, I discovered audiobooks, having never ever wanted to listen to audiobooks. I've tried them in the past, never liked them, but I realised that the library service offers up to 3 audiobook loans a month. I just couldn't believe it, all for free. Plus I also pay for Spotify family premium membership for me and all the kids. I realised that I get 15 hours a month listening time free on that as well. So I suddenly realised I'd got all this access to free audiobooks. And I am somebody that my school run for the kids in a day, I add the morning and the evening school run together, I'm in the car for 3.5 hours. If I add the evenings where my daughter's at her evening job, I'm in the car for 4.5 hours a day, every day. So I decided that it might be worth me trying to have another go at audiobooks, which I did in February, and I absolutely loved it. And what I decided to do, I decided to use my audiobooks as a healing journey to heal my inner child. Now, there is a little part of my inner child that is always forever sad that I was never ever read to as a little girl. Was never read to. Reading to my kids has been one of my ultimate joys of my life, with the kids all on the bed every night, snuggled up with me reading every night. It was something that we all looked forward to, and having done it for my own kids, it just made me so sad that I'd never been read to as a child. So I decided to use my audiobooks as a way to be read to. And what I did on Goodreads is I went back to the year that I was born, so 1968, and I made a shelf for all the books that were released in 1968, and I'm going to do that for each of the years of my childhood and pick some books from each year that I would have been read to if I had anybody that wanted to read to me, and I'm going to get my audiobooks to read them to me. And that's exactly what I started doing in February. Was it healing? It was incredibly healing. Now, what book did I choose off the 1968 shelf for the very first audiobook I ever listened to? I listened to a kid's book, which was just a wonderful listen. It was a real 60s listen, and it's this book, Escape to Witch Mountain, because I do want to throughout the year have a constant supply of like witchy fiction and non-fiction books going, because that's just my thing. And when I saw that title and this really 60s cover, I just knew it was a non-brainer to go for this one. Plus the fact it was a kid's book, it just seemed really apt that this one was the one I started with, and I loved it. So you've got strange powers, you've got kids being chased, you've got not knowing who is a goodie and who is a baddie, and you've got finding family. You've also got spaceships in here, and like I say, it's a real 1960s novel. I loved it. It was fun, it was light. So the library and audiobooks, massive changes for me in February with my reading. And another witchy book that I read, and I part split this one up, part audiobook listening and part reading, because I'd found this in a charity shop for 50p. This is The Witches of Vardo by Anya Bergman. Again, I completely loved this. This was a 4-star read for me. Set in Norway, in the villages of Norway, in the time of witch hunts and witch burnings. Absolutely horrific in parts, and it makes you realise just how horrendous the days of the witch trials were. But it is an amazing story of female strength, female companionship as well, bravery and magic all in there. And the thing that is horrifying to realise is Anya based this on records, proper records of what happened in the witch trials in this part of the country. And she says in her acknowledgements that some of the names were actual real women, some of the things they went through were real things they went through. And she said some of the things she left out were even worse than that were in the book. So it really was an eye-opening look back in history on some of the terrible atrocities that men did to women. Men who, in the name of chasing down the devil, became devils themselves. Like the gaze should have been turned inwards, let's say, and not finger pointed at the women. But it's a tale as old as time. I think we still see it even today. We see a lot of women being blamed for things that they should never be blamed for. So it was encouraging to still hold on to strength. It was tear-jerking, it was tense at times, really sad at times, but a beautiful story about female friendship, and I loved it. So that was a 4-star read for me, and it was also the book that I had put down for the Read Good challenge from Ben Reads Good. His February challenge was Flamuary, which is read a book with flames on the cover, and I had put this one down for that. So that was my Ben Reads Good challenge. I did read another one with flames on the cover, which I'll get to in a minute. So February was really busy as well in other ways. I was converting a room downstairs into a gym for my son's 15th birthday, so we had a big birthday here in February, so that took a lot of my time. On a day when I was at birthday shopping and going to the sports shop, trying to find weights and punch bags and things, I stopped off to grab a cup of coffee in this cafe and realised they got books in there, and the woman said, just take a book, you can take it home if you like it, just bring it back when you're finished with it. And I sat there and I read from their shelves Adam Kay's This Is Going to Hurt. It is The Secret Diaries of a Junior Doctor, and it's been a long time since a book has made me laugh out loud in public, and this did. Now, I only got about 50 pages in while I was sat having my coffee. It is quite a quick read. It's diary entries, brilliantly done, really eye-opening again into the world of medicine and what it's like to be a trainee doctor. I really enjoyed it. I'll need to finish it, but it was lovely to find a cafe in town where I can go and read books. So I've also through February been continuing with my Dickens reading. So for my DIY literature degree this year, I'm focusing on Victorian literature. Dickens is an author that I've not really read before. The plan is to get through as many Dickens books as I can get through in 2025. This is the second month of David Copperfield, which is what I've been reading and loving. I am now just on page 415, but it goes up to about 840. So I am only halfway through, and I wanted to get this finished in March. So still have a fair way to get through, but I'm plodding through it and loving it, really loving it. It's blown me away. Dickens' characters are some of the most fabulous characters I think I've ever read. They're characters that will stay with me forever. Once I realised what this cover was, it made me cry. It's made me cry so many times, and I'm not even really halfway through it. I'm loving it. If you are reading David Copperfield along with me, I know some of you are, let me know how you're getting on. Have you got further than page 415? Are we going to finish it in March? I wonder. The last book that I read in February is the book that I think may have pushed Wuthering Heights off the #1 favourite book ever slot. Again, this links with the Read Good challenge because it's got a flame on the front. It also was a crossover with my Victorian literature. Not only do I want to read a few Dickens books this year, but I also wanted to read all of the key Bronte novels. So I chose Villette to read in February because if you can see on this writing bureau, there is a little single candle alight. So it did fit in with Flamuary, and it also covered that desire to read all the Bronte novels. So far with the Bronte novels, I've read Jane Eyre twice, and I've read Wuthering Heights about 4 times, and that's it. So it was really nice to pick up another Charlotte Bronte and to get a chance to read it. And I am not joking, this book, it broke me. To say it broke me is not an exaggeration. It broke me. I adored it. I sobbed so hard at the end. In fact, I sobbed a lot all the way through it. So we've got the character of Lucy Snow, who is quite a lonesome figure. We find her situation changes, and it doesn't really tell us what happens to her family. Suddenly she doesn't seem to have anybody around her, and so she decides to take the few possessions and the tiny little bit of money she's got and to just board a boat to Brussels to go and teach English in Brussels. She is a French speaker. There is a lot of French in here, big passages of French, which I would say, if you're going to read this, if you Google online a website for all the French bits of Villette translated, what I did, I just found a page with a grid with the page numbers, and as you got to it, gave you the translation. That is worth doing, because there's a lot of key bits in Villette that you do need the translation if you can't speak French. So I would advise you do that. A lot of it you can kind of work out through context, but there are some key passages that you can't necessarily work out through context, which add a lot to the characters. So do get the French translation if you're going to read it. But is it worth it reading the book if you have to go to all that trouble with the French? Absolutely. It is so atmospheric. I think that's why it might have pushed Wuthering Heights off the top spot, just because the atmosphere of the school where she gets the job, there is a ghost, there is suspense, there is love interest, there's unrequited love that just broke my heart. Her loneliness is really touching, losing family and that loneliness of feeling all alone. I think it broke me because in my life I've experienced a lot of that as well. Just that story of unrequited love. She is a people watcher. She watches people, and there's very much a sense that she feels othered from people, but she's got this incredible inner life going on as well. I read this just begging for a happy ending for her. I won't spoil the ending, but yeah, I felt broken at the end of this, but in the most, I've just read something incredible way. And just like with Wuthering Heights, it's just been haunting me. I've not been able to get it out of my mind. I loved it. So if you haven't read Villette yet, pick it up. It is brilliant, but be warned, if you've got the sort of disposition like I've got, it may just break you a little bit to read. That's it, guys. So there was some Victorian literature going towards my Victorian studies, which was great. There was a new cafe found, there was the Ben Reads Good challenge done, there was Fanguary completed with another Victorian novel ticked off as well, and non-fiction. My aim to read more non-fiction art books, which is always a aim for me for my reading, was also ticked off, plus audiobooks. Fantastic reading month. So now all that's left is for me to say, please tell me all about your reading, especially if you are taking part in the Candy reading challenge. My gosh, how was Fanguary for you? What books did you read? What did you think? Did you give them any star ratings? And looking forward now to March, Moonlit March we're in now. I'm going to do, my next video will be about what I'm reading for Moonlit March, my pile of possibilities for Moonlit March. So join me for that. And thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you next time. Bye.